Hey, so this is gonna be a voiceover video. I'll add photos or images or whatnot. Just to stimulate. But I think this is gonna be a very raw video because I genuinely just want to be vulnerable for once. I think that in the past, I have made videos revolving about my interests because, I wanted to express myself in that manner because, I'm very passionate about a lot of things. I like a lot of things. I like writing. I like fashion. I like gaming. I like a lot of things. And I think that I'm 28 right now, and I've come to a point where I've realized that I have a very difficult time being truly vulnerable because I always feel like my life is just a performance and not necessarily one where I'm able to be myself. And I apologize for the stuttering. Again, I just want this to be a unfiltered raw video, or audio type. I don't know. But yeah, and the reason why I'm like this is because a couple nights ago, I had a couple sips of Everclear, which I will not have ever again. And my boyfriend was drunk at this time, and we wanted to get drunk together, and we only had Everclear, and I took a sip of Everclear, and I was just like, ugh, tastes horrible, never would do that again. But I feel like it was enough, right, for me to kind of like get the ball rolling kind of thing. And I remember sitting on our bed, and my boyfriend is kind of laying there, saying drunk shit, as drunk people do. And I felt it enough, to bring my walls down just a bit, where I didn't have as much of a filter. And I remember looking up, and I said, with tears running down my face, I want to be vulnerable. And I said, I want to feel like a human being and not like a robot. Because all my life has been, so I realized just looking back at my childhood, has always been performance-based, and I didn't realize it. I never realized the full scope of how much I performed. If you don't know, I am autistic. I was one of the rare girls in the late 90s, early 2000s that was diagnosed with autism. And subsequently, I was put in therapy. And I think what happened there was based on what I was told and things like that. Because I truly think that I displayed very noticeable signs of autism. That's why I got checked, and that's why I got diagnosed. Because doctors won't just diagnose girls that easily. Nay. I think that I either was very noticeable or I presented symptoms that are more like how boys present. But whatever the case, I spent a lot of my, from early childhood to mid-childhood, I spent a lot of years in therapy for autistic people. And I believe what happened there was I learned to basically suppress myself. I learned skills on how to behave more normally, behave more typically. And I think that in exchange, I lost my authenticity and I just lost the ability to be authentic. Because I gained these skills to be presenting more normally. Because I do not believe that these places have, especially back then, have had autistic children or their well-being in the forefront. I genuinely believe that I was just merely taught to cope in ways where my symptoms were not noticeable and to basically suppress my symptoms to look more typical, right? Because I think back about my schooling and I was told that I would line up things as a kid before I had therapy and stuff like that, of course, but I was very noticeably autistic before I went into therapy. When I got out, as a child, so let me preface this with some information. So I have had a journey where I have encountered on TikTok primarily many autistic autistic creators, and I've listened to a lot of their stories and I've listened to a lot of testimonials and information on there. And what I find is that a lot of autistic people who are not diagnosed, they were diagnosed too, I don't know, but mostly people who are undiagnosed, they tended to be children who didn't have friends in school, who were kind of loners, and they didn't really go outside and play with other children during recess. Those kinds of things. That is typically what I hear. And I already know that that's not the end-all be-all autistic experience, but that is the most common one that I hear. Especially for those who are level 1 autistic and level 2. For me, I never struggled to have friends in school. I had friends since kindergarten, and not only did I have a best friend, I also made friends I made a bunch of friends on my own. Some were close, some were, not as close, but still talk in school. And I played with my friends as typical children do. I was not a loner at recess. I had friends and I played with them at recess as typical children do. And even in middle school, my best friend at that time brought me a lot of my friends, my close friends. And our friendship was mainly based on interest. So I feel that this friendship was able to grow strong because it was based on interest. And I also made friends on my own as well. And I talked to people just different ways and stuff like that. And I think even with my childhood, oh, sorry, I have to make a separate audio file. I have to help my cat. And I think back about my playing habits as a kid, and I realized I played with my toys pretty much as typical children do. I played with them pretty much how typical children do. I made up stories about my characters. I had them in different scenarios, things like that. And I think there are a couple of reasons why I did this. One, because I pretty much internalized being neurotypical. And two, stories are my special interest. They have been and I know that because I'm a writer. I love to write. I like to come up with, like even in video games nowadays, when I play video games and I have a character, especially in like Dark Souls or something like that, I like to assign certain characteristics towards them, and I like to kind of like come up with like a little backstory about their character. I like to name them, all that kind of stuff. So I think that storytelling is part of who I am as a person and what I like to do. It's one of my main, interests. I like to build worlds. That is something I like to do. And that is one of my core special interests. And I think that's part of the reason why my play style looked very similar very similar to typical children's, because one of my major special interests was writing and storytelling and kind of like imagination and that kind of stuff. And also because I internalized neurotypical kind of things on a micro level. And even though people weren't watching me, I still was performing. And I didn't even realize it. And all these years I grew up and I always felt that I was fighting something. I don't know what it was, but I always felt that I was fighting something. And, especially as I got into my teen years, all that kind of stuff. And because I think too, with my home life, I had pretty much everything materially. I never struggled with, my family never struggled with food. I lived in middle class, even upper middle class, I would dare say. I never really had to worry about anything with that. But emotionally is a different manner. And I really don't want to go into that right now, right this instant. But basically, emotionally, it was not a good time for me. And I did not get my emotional needs met. I was emotionally neglected by both my parents. And I forgot what I was talking about. I'm sorry. But what saved me, what I feel personally saved me from, as a child, was my own writing. Because I believe that I was not be able to be mirrored by my parents. My parents were not able to mirror me, nor any adult in my life. And I think part of that is because I'm autistic, and I think just my nature itself, I just think that I wasn't able to be properly mirrored. And so what I did was, I remember after I started writing around like 9 or 10 years old. And that was around the time where my therapy ended, which is really weird timing. Which means I feel like I turned to writing as a space to be able to be authentic, because I had nowhere else to go. So I turned to writing in an attempt to mirror myself, because, like I said, I had no one else that could mirror me. And I'm sorry if I repeat myself a lot, or if I'm going in circles. Yeah. And I think that is an incredible feat for someone that young to turn to writing as a source of mirroring and escape and regulation. I think that's very impressive. And I also turned to, when I was a teenager, my best friend introduced me to K-pop indirectly. And I was kind of thrusted in this world of like K-pop and anime as well. And so those things also got me through my teenage years because it was something that I enjoyed. It helped shape my identity and my interests and my passions and my overall creativity, if I didn't say that already. And yeah, like those things really helped me because I had nowhere else emotionally to go. And I also think too that I've learned to soften myself because recently I figured out that I'm actually a very intense person and I have a very intense personality type. But I know that a lot of people cannot handle that level of intensity. And I don't say this as a slight. I don't say this as like, I feel like sometimes I think like maybe I'm like holier than thou or something like that. I don't mean it like that. I just genuinely am a more intense person. And I've learned to soften myself over the years. And when I first got TikTok, I discovered what masking was. And I was in my early to mid 20s at this time. I had no idea that masking was a thing, even though I always knew that I was autistic. I genuinely had no idea that masking was a thing, that was what autistic people and children alike do. And I think back about all those years, and what I believe happened was I masked everywhere. Even with my family, I have masked. I put on this persona of being a soft girl, a soft, quiet, delicate girl, but deep down, I'm a very fiery, very intense, very passionate person. And I've had to lock it away for many, many years for many reasons. And I was not ever able to be vulnerable with anyone. And I've always had to keep up this kind of performance that I didn't even realize that I was doing. I didn't realize that I was performing until I was in my mid-20s in masking, because masking is basically performing. I had no idea that I was masking. I had no idea that I was basically performing until I was 25 years old. And the thing is too, I don't mask how typical people do. Usually when we think of masking, what I learned from TikTok is that people mask more outwardly. They kind of adopt more neurotypical mannerisms more outwardly. That's not what I did and what I do. My masking is quiet. My masking is making myself as small as possible. So, and I think I did that because I could apply that to many different situations and my brain wouldn't get so tired all the time. I could apply this quiet, invisible masking to literally any social environment and I could get by. And yeah, and I would always try to kind of like quietly maneuver around people, not really speak up, not really express myself truthfully. I kind of just always said what I thought other people wanted to hear. I you know. And I remember when I got into my early 20s, I did let some of that go around my family. And it was not met very well, because I think that at that point I was breaking down and I was being burnt out from all of this silent, heavy thing. Because I always felt too that there's something heavy internally that I'm always carrying, and I didn't really notice it fully until probably my mid-20s. And I think that heavy thing is masking and having to navigate an environment where I cannot be authentic, and I have to monitor myself constantly. And to a degree, I think that other people, like when you're in certain situations, you're never fully authentic and stuff like that. I think that is true, especially like work and things like that. But for me, I suppressed everything about myself. I basically put on this, one fits all mask where I could apply it to different situations. And I never was able to be authentic or express myself in any kind of situation, really. I felt like I never really had a voice. And I think the fact of the matter is that I was never able to be vulnerable. Truthfully vulnerable. I was never able to be. And I think that I also am developing narcissistic traits. I think it is out of, coping. It's like a coping mechanism because of how alone that I've been emotionally all my life. And I think that I'm starting to adopt narcissistic traits. I'm trying very hard not to. And I fear that I could very well be narcissistic or have NPD. And I looked onto Reddit as to how I can heal from this. And it's basically radical acceptance of who I am right now in the present, and not the idealized self. And also being vulnerable. Those two things. And I think it kind of pieced it together for me, because I think that I was never truly able to be vulnerable. And I've tried desperately to be vulnerable with my family, with pretty much anyone that seemed, emotionally open. I tried very hard to be vulnerable, but I feel that every single one of the people that I have grown close to, whether it's family, friends, coworkers, strangers, I have been treated, I guess I've been betrayed emotionally by my family, by my friends. And I think that there is a part where I have to take accountability as well, because that, I think that, that's where the narcissistic traits come to play. I think that at times I tend to play victim, and I don't know if the stuff that I go through is, legitimately, I'm sorry, I'm wiping my cat's mouth right now. He has bone cancer on his jaw, and I'm basically doing palliative care on him right now. And yeah. And so there's a good chance that I might be narcissistic, or there's a good chance that I'm narcissistic, or I'm a narcissist. And I think what I truly desire is to be vulnerable, and I feel I have nowhere to go. And so I'm posting this selfishly. And I'm doing this too because this is the first time I've ever really truly been vulnerable. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end it there. It's pretty heavy stuff, but it's cathartic in a way. And I don't know, maybe someone else out there can relate and I'm not alone. I feel very alone. I feel like I'm trying very hard. And I don't know if I'm just delusional. That could be very true. And I'm just, rewriting my memory to make myself the victim or something. I could very well be. I honestly don't know. Yeah, this is me. And this is me being very raw and very vulnerable. Thank you for listening all the way through if you did. And yeah, I'll probably use this as a space to practice being vulnerable from now on. Because I don't know where else to go. But yeah.